Blue Jay and JNT 250 here, bringing you guys episode 35 of the Clown Fiesta podcast. We are well into playoffs now. TSM is starting the miracle run in the lower bracket. You can argue whether their play was miracle or not. And then also, we got C9 and TL that will be duking it out this weekend. That game's supposed to be really good. I think it's fair to say that they're clearly our top two teams. But I mean, some people on Hotline League get pretty upset when other people say that, apparently. Regardless, I think they're our top two teams. And so I think we're set up for a lot of good games this weekend coming up. Before we do that, we're going to get into the games from last weekend, of course. And also, we're going to talk about a little bit of LEC this week. Not a lot, but I think the series were quite good. And I think it's also good to start talking a little bit about other regions as we start to approach MSI. Before we do that, let's talk about the Coach of the Split award being put out.
It's the coaching staff of the Split.
Yeah. Yes, okay, you are correct. It is the coaching staff of the Split. It was Cloud9. Some people upset about it. Most people don't really give a shit. I am on the don't give a shit side. I think I think we're ready to get rid of that award, aren't we?
Yeah.
No?
It's like it's not even like it's a bad award or anything. Just for I was about to say for your average fan, for pretty much all fans, you don't even like know whether it's an accurate award because it's so,
even for the people that pick the award, they admit that they don't even know.
Exactly. Like coaches in the LCS, while I think everybody knows and understands that they are a vital aspect of a team, people still really have no clue what the value to that team actually is. Different coaches have various different styles, whether it's some like what of a dictatorship or whether you're just like the last piece of the puzzle for the whole team to work together. You're not the primary voice, but you're that voice that keeps everything moving. It's so hard to actually make the correct choice from the outside looking in. And I feel like most of the times it ends up just getting given to the team with the best record, unless there are some extenuating circumstances.
So let me just say that if the people voting don't know who it should be, and the fans don't know it should be, and even the players and coaches, because they don't know what's going on in the other scrims or the other team's environment, even if the players and coaches don't know, no one knows. What the hell are we doing here with this award? Scrap it. Let's move on. It's like, I feel like we talk about the same thing every time this award comes out. Let's get rid of it, honestly. I think it's time for it to go. All it does is make some controversy over stuff that no one really knows about. You have to hear all the freaking three-head people come out and say that they disagree with the thing, and anyway.
Yeah, I don't know. It kind of feels like it just feels like when they probably created this whole award system, like I assume they just mirrored it off of traditional sports, whether it's the NFL, the MLB, the NBA, the NHL. All of these leagues have these exact awards where a coach wins Coach of the Split, somebody wins MVP, somebody wins Rookie of the Year, and it was kind of like mirrored off of that. And while I think that's completely fine to do, I think we are in a bit of a different circumstance for like League of Legends comparison to the rest of all these big sports in the world. And we could use some different awards that maybe provide a better idea of what's most important, or not I don't know. You know what I mean though? It doesn't have to be straight copy paste.
Yeah, I think that every time we try to copy and paste something from traditional sports, we end up regretting it later. That's pretty common. But anyways, I've said my piece. Anything else you want to say on that?
What I will say is I don't think Cloud9 was undeserving by any means. I think they made some really great additions to the coaching staff over the split. Obviously, it was originally put out there that the Cloud9 roster was going to stick together, and the only change that they were going to be making was in the coaching staff. No more Reaper, and Rainover was going to step up and be the new head coach. While that plan did eventually change, I think Cloud9 still did a really great job of bringing in additional members on their coaching staff, players like Mithy, players like Max Waldo, players like Vagar V2. They seem to, one, be very vocal sort of within the community, and two, very vocal within the team. And it's definitely good to just add a bunch of smart minds to your team to give you various different looks.
That I'll agree with, and they came first, so yeah, here you go.
Yeah.
I wonder how often the first place team gets it. I know it does happen quite a bit. I don't remember how often though. But anyways, other than that, let's talk a little bit about the LEC playoffs because I think they were quite good. Like I said at the start, we're not going to go too far into the whatever there. We're not going to get too far into it, but there were some pretty good games again. For was in Fnatic, and I
Yo,
thought that
hey,
that series was not feel that closer than would. So many of the games were just. Pardon me.
you like lagged out for like 15 seconds. So
Oh, I apologize.
maybe just
Yeah. Okay. So I
maybe
guess
just
I should
start
get.
from the beginning.
Can you get the disclaimer out that my whole city is experiencing
Yeah,
internet issues for the past 2 months?
we put this preface out before last week's episode, but yeah, Jamie's internet has been a bit wonky lately. So apologies for any of the lag, the start and stops in terms of the conversation. But basically, what we're trying to say is the LEC was really exciting this weekend. I feel like, you know, whenever we kind of compare the playoffs of the LCS and the LEC, it just feels like there's way more parity in terms of the bottom teams versus the top teams. Because in North America, it is normally pretty cut and dry with, whenever a top team is facing a bottom team, the top team is just so much more likely to win than the bottom team. But in the LEC, we see a ton of exciting series with a ton of back and forth between these perceived bottom teams, ones who don't really stand much of a chance against these giants. We saw that, exactly in the G2 versus Schalke series where G2 just completely smashed them in the first two games. Schalke ends up, coming back in games 3, 4, and 5. And, those last three games of that series were super, super competitive. Could have got, there were times in all three of those games where the game went on a knife edge, and G2's I think veteran experience kind of pulled out in the end, and they won that best of 5 on Saturday. But if you were tuning into the LEC this weekend, there were three great series. Friday, SK versus Fnatic was also a really great back and forth series. G2 Schalke could be maybe your best series of the year in terms of playoffs. I don't know, it'd be pretty hard to top that. And then Mad Lions versus Rogue, we saw a big upset with Mad Lions taking down Rogue.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, like we were saying, the G2 and Schalke series was hands down the most exciting one that ended up going over into the LCS. But I was just happy to see Broken Blade pop off on Darius, man. That's what we want to see. I want to see Broken Blade pop off. I love that guy, and it's really nice to see him do so well in the LEC.
For sure. I really thought that TSM was gonna regret not keeping Broken Blade and signing Huni, but I think a lot of people, Huni has kind of exceeded a lot of people's expectations, and I think Broken Blade has still maintained a really high level of play in the LEC now. I think he was probably Schalke's most consistent player, especially during their bit of a slump they had in the middle of the season. And he really, he played very well in playoffs. He was heavily punishing, G2's, top lane playstyle that they've kind of been going with recently, which has just been basically tank top laners for Wonder in the top lane. We're seeing a ton of Sion from him, a ton of Gragas from him. And yeah, we saw Broken Blade whip out to Darius. We've actually seen Darius in a few other minor regions in terms of a counter pick into these, super tanks of Sion and Gragas. And it was really good to see it, kind of be brought more into mainstream. Broken Blade really showed up, got a pentakill. It was funny because literally the week prior, there was a clip on Reddit of I think it was in the LFL. There was the EU Masters French League or whatever. Another guy who's playing Darius got a penta, and so that was pretty cool.
Yeah, sorry, I'm just resetting the stream here because, yeah. Sorry about this, guys. Sorry for the lag and whatnot. Okay. Okay. Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. The one thing that I did want to talk about with the Schalke, or pardon me, with the Fnatic and the SK series, or I actually think did I already mention it? Did I already talk? I'm so freaking distracted. Did I already talk about how the games were just decided through bot lane?
No.
Dude,
well, we just did now.
This is so hella scuffed, man. I'm lagging like crazy.
Well, you're fine right now. I don't know about just you've been fine right now.
I'm just resetting the stream up. I'm sorry again, guys. Everyone in the live chat. I don't really have much more to say. I wasn't able to catch the Mad series, unfortunately, the Mad and Rogue series, because I had other things going on. But anyways, yeah, I just think that it's worth talking about the LEC because I think that normally the games are quite good, and I think that most people that watch the LCS also watch the LEC, which kind of makes me want to talk about why are we scheduling the LCS early so that the games overlap, right? This is something I just talked about on Hotline League not too long ago, and boy, I thought the conversation was going to be short, but it went quite long. Jesus, man. Okay, so I understand that you want to catch primetime. I get that. But you have no viewership because everyone is so into the G2 and Schalke series. Like, man, I don't know what to say. Like, it's so ridiculous to me that I have to choose between one or the other. It just sucks as a fan. And I thought the LCS would kind of know that. Like, I think you should anticipate that if that game goes five, or that series goes 5 games, that you're gonna miss out on a lot of viewership. And that's exactly what we saw this past weekend.
Yeah, I didn't actually watch Hotline League, so I didn't really get to hear what you had to say. But I do assume that when franchising sort of came into the picture, they definitely, they, from what I understand, before franchising, the LCS and, at the time, the EU LCS, always used to work together in terms of their scheduling, specifically for like finals week and, when there are primetime playoff matches. And back then, we would often see the LCS broadcast be delayed should the EU LCS broadcast go longer. And I think, when franchising has come into the picture, like you just said, they sort of have these time windows that they need to be hitting or they want to be hitting. But obviously, it's not the best experience for maybe not your North American fan, but just your average league fan who's interested in multiple regions like the LEC, like the LCS, because, we were watching the G2 Schalke series, and as it went into game 5, like the fifth game was starting right when the first EGTSM game was starting. So basically, we were basically watching almost an hour behind on the now EGTSM series because it took up basically 45 minutes into the broadcast.
And that is what I think was so telling about it, was that it was a TSM series that still had really poor viewership. Like, if it was Dignitas versus 100 Thieves, I don't think many people would be surprised. They'd be like, oh yeah, like not many people are going to watch this. No, this was a TSM series, and I think that that speaks to how much people want to watch both and how they were so invested in the G2 series already. Like, you got to watch game 5, man. How can you miss that, especially after how it was going in reverse sweep fashion at the time?
For sure. Like that's what's always like so exciting about like just best of fives in general is when you get like the whole reverse sweeping. I feel like reverse sweeps, especially in League of Legends, are like it's like the pinnacle for like exciting series when a team is looking so good and they smash you in the first 2 games going 2-0 up, and then Shaka is basically just starting to mount this comeback where they, they were in like winning positions in game 5 and could have arguably won that game. But like I did mention right at the start, was I think G2's veteran presence really showed in terms of how they needed to approach the game and how they just needed to like wait out and utilize their comp, because like they had that comp in game 5 which was like completely cracked out of its mind with like the Seraphine, the double tank, and the Lucian. And yeah, it ended up going to G2 in the end. But we even saw that like Yankos did a stream right after the day after the series, and he basically just said on stream like, yeah, we literally were trolling in game 3 by not banning a champion. They were like, he basically just said like we were super cocky that we were just going to win this series, and they were kind of like not taking it as serious as they should be at the time. And I feel like in game 5 is probably where like they just had to like cut the bullshit and like figure things out.
So look, as a fan, I think that's hilarious, right? Like, that is so funny, and like I can't believe that happens. First of all, as a fan, like I'm like, wow, I can't believe they're just like, yeah, who cares about the band? Like, we saw the clip. He's like, yeah, we didn't really care. But if I'm a coach, I am losing it. Like, I am so mad because, well, they went game 5. Clearly there's a chance that they lose that series. And if it's something that Schalke could have popped off on and you didn't ban it, oh my god, am I absolutely losing it, right? Like, as a coach and as a player, I'd be pretty disappointed in myself if I was the one that didn't ban.
Well, I mean, the clip made it kind of sound like they just didn't ban for the memes as opposed to missing a ban.
I mean, yeah, maybe, right? I
So
don't know. Regardless of what it is, though, I'm still pissed if I'm a coach.
uh, I mean, from what I know of like the whole G2 meme mentality and grabs or whatever, like I'm
Yeah,
pretty sure they were just memeing. Like
you're saying that Grabs is like in on it. You're saying like
yeah,
he's like, yeah, just whatever. And
yeah.
yeah, that is totally possible. Totally possible. But again, if I was on that coaching staff, I'd still be pissed, even at the head coach. Like, man, that looks so bad if you lose that, and especially if you don't make it. Like, what if you end up facing, I don't know, a really hot team somehow in lower bracket? I know that's not really all that possible, but somehow you get knocked out, right? then you don't get that chance to get that experience at World or that at MSI that you want to have going into Worlds. Like you could pay a really large price for something that is just not worth the memes, if you ask me. But again, as a fan, I thought it was hilarious and I loved it. So, uh, you
Yeah.
take the good with the bad, I guess.
Yeah, and I mean the one interesting thing that I really want to take away from that series is, you know, in general, when we see these sort of niche counter picks pop off and do really well into X Champion, we normally see it pick up a little more play around the world, and I just wonder if Darius actually might become a little more meta just because we saw that like pop off clip from the guy in the LFL got the penta on Darius. We saw how like Broken Blade was basically imposing his will on Wonder the entirety of the game in those Darius versus Tank matchups. Kind of similar, we'll talk about a bit later to how like Arya started to pop up a little bit. Jensen kind of debuted in NA. We saw a game of it in EU in the SK Fnatic series. We saw it in the 100 Thieves Dignitas series. So I wonder if Darius is sort of going to pick up a little bit more traction just because we've seen it and seen it be successful.
Yeah, specifically against the Scion, right? That's where
Well,
they
yeah.
kept picking it.
And I think in the other one, they picked it into Gragas, or in the other region, they picked it into Gragas. Basically,
Well, and
you just pick it into the fat tanks.
yeah, and you see the thing is you could see so many of these bruisers because of why is the item name escaping me? Help me out. Yes, because of
Item is
Stridebreaker, you're
broken.
seeing so many of these champions that have so much more mobility now. Like Renekton is on crack now because he's got Stridebreaker. Like it's not just Darius. So there's so many bruisers that I wonder if we start to see them more and more just because that item still exists and it's so OP.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All right, we good to move into our NA series?
Yeah, let's get into TSM versus Evil Geniuses. Definitely the better of the two series that we saw this weekend, right?
Yep.
Yeah, no doubt. I'll let you start us off. What were your initial thoughts?
Um, Initial thoughts. TSM was definitely the better team on the day. I think, to be honest, this series screamed more to me of EG losing it than TSM winning it.
I know a lot of TSM fans are not going to like that, but I totally agree. I think EG threw in like 3 different games they had leads or something.
Well, I'm like specifically in games 3 and 4. I definitely fault Evil Geniuses more in game 4 than in game 3 because I did think that Power of Evil had some really insane Orianna ults in game 3 to bring them back. He had like a 4-man-1 mid lane and then like a 4-man-1 again, sort of towards like enemy base near the base gate. But basically, that's still Evil Genius's fault to be grouping up and walking into an Orianna like that. You just simply can't do that against that champion and in the spots that they were doing. But EG was in winning positions in all 4 games, basically.
Was it all 4? I remember it was a lot of them. That's for sure.
Game 2, or sorry, game. I don't. Yeah, game 2. What game? Sorry, it's game 1 because TSM won game 1. Uh, Kind of. I don't know. It was close, but basically, I think EG had really strong early games. Throughout the entire series, I think Svenskeren played very well. I think on the flip side, Spica also played really, really well. It was pretty interesting to see TSM just go full Udyr priority. We kind of saw the same thing the next series with Dardoch and Dignitas. But, Udyr, like, it's been shown since the lock-in tournament that this champion basically just like dominates the early game because you'll just naturally get a golden XP advantage through farming all your camps. And kind of in tandem, what TSM did was, picking some pretty strong lanes and in turn just like racing down early objectives. Spica in the majority of games was getting double Rift Herald, double early Dragon, and from that point it was pretty difficult for EG to like kind of come back into the game and just get back even on objectives, which they were sometimes able to do. But as the game kind of just as each game kind of mounted and mounted, and it came down to these like crucial snap decisions and like these small positioning battles, like TSM basically won all of them in game 3, getting all those disgusting Orianna ultis, and in game 4, winning that battle for Dragon, and like EG just basically didn't contest, chase them into this bot lane alcove where EG was a bit discombobulated in terms of their engage because Impact kind of flashed in a little bit early when Deathly and Jizuke weren't really in position, and then they all kind of follow up late on this engage. They all like dive in. It was like a 4-for-0 ace, and TSM just kind of gets Baron, wins the game.
Yeah, I like that you bring up Spica because, well, we've talked for a while now that we want to see Spica do more in the early game and he needs to be more effective in the early game. I think he was this series, but I would also say I think both junglers were really good in the early game for this series. I think it was just later on that mid game and late game Svenskeren I thought was pretty lackluster on his Lilia ultis. If I'm being completely honest, there's too many times where I see him ult and he's getting one person with a Lilia ult. Now, sometimes that's okay, but a lot of times in a big team fight, that is just not gonna do it. That really peeling one guy is really easy when he's Lilia ulted, but when three guys get Lilia ulted, or even two for that matter, it's really tough to play against the Lilia as a champion. So I really was disappointed with Svenskeren in the late game, but he was very active early on, and I think both junglers got a lot of successful ganks off in the early game in this series altogether.
Yeah, that you just reminded me of like that. Like Svenskeren also played 4 games with Lily in that series. I just thought it was so weird the whole jungle dynamic that was going on, specifically from the evil genius's side. Because I said this and went down like a whole tangent on a previous episode where I really have hated when teams are double banning junglers on red side, and you're trading like you're basically banning there's 4 OP junglers in the meta right now. There's Udyr, there's Olaf, there's Hecarim, and there's Lilia. And if you're the red side team, you're going to ban 2 of those OP junglers and then take, the worst of the 2 remaining. It just doesn't make any sense to me. And while I do think Lily is still a very strong champion, it has its weaknesses when you're able to get your other champions like the Hecarim and the Olaf, which do so well into it. So it was just super confusing to me to see EG opt into this matchup all 4 games of the series. And, I still think Svenskeren did a pretty good job in the early game, but you could really see like how disruptive Udyr is during these team fights, where he basically is just like running in and stunning multiple people throughout the entirety of the fights. And like you mentioned, I think Svenskeren's performances past like 15, 20 minutes really dropped in terms of his impact that he was able to have with the champion, with only
Yeah,
getting
no,
like one man sleeps or whatever.
it's a really good point about the banning 2 junglers and leaving 2 available. I actually completely agree. However, I would say this series actually had nothing to do with that because they were able to get so many advantages early. It was just later that they were throwing, and I don't think that had anything to do necessarily with the junglers as much as it did their actual play. Like it didn't have to do as much with the champions, is what I'm trying to say, but then their actual play. Like they were just making really silly mistakes. A lot of people had a lot of bad things to say about Deathly specifically in game 3 and 4. Yeah, I agree. Honestly, is the short version. The long version is his team fighting was atrocious. He's playing Kaisa. He's hella fed. I think this was game 4,
Yeah,
and he's
he
too afraid
was
to go in. And then
disgustingly fed.
when he finally goes in, he flashes on the spot. Like, oh my god, it was like it really felt. You know what it felt like? It felt like a player that was really under too much pressure and he couldn't handle it. Because when I see a guy flash on the spot in like the last team fight of the game, like I feel bad for him because I bet you he's nervous, but also like, dude, that really hurts you, man. You
Yeah,
can't do that and win a series.
the worst part about it was like definitely was just talked about as this player that he's not gonna like 1v9 win you the game, but he's not gonna run it down and lose you the game. And unfortunately, that was kind of the story of game 3 and 4. Specifically in that game 4, like we mentioned, he was absurdly fed on Kaisa throughout the entirety of this game. Was super hesitant in a lot of these earlier team fights. Um, to go in and really like XD have the killer instinct because he's playing Kaisa, and we've talked about this before. XD
Killer instinct, baby.
but pretty much he kind of realizes the errors in his ways a bit too late into the game, and then in those last 2 crucial team fights goes in too deep. Like in that last Alco fight, he literally ulted into 3 people. Like I don't even remember what happened. Impact flashed in, and then about 2 seconds later, Deathly's ulting into 3 people in the alcove, trades like Hooney to kill himself, and then they lose Baron, lose the game. It was just
Everyone was already dead by the time he got in there, and
yeah.
he did like it was just bad.
But like you said, it did kind of feel like he cracked under the pressure, which is really sad to see because I think he was having a pretty solid split for the most part. Like he had his amazing performances during lock-in where he was looking like a really great AD. Wasn't necessarily doing those same things during the regular season, but like we said, like he was just doing a serviceable, solid job, which is, all you can ask for on a team where you have your solo laners, which were really the strengths of this team, and Impact and Jizuke. But, this, games 3 and 4 specifically were kind of Deathly's fault.
I will say that I do think he's being scapegoated a little bit. That's not the right term. It's not the right term because he's definitely still to blame, but I just think he wasn't the only one to blame. Like Jizuke is like 2-0-2 at the start of that game. Svenskeren is 2-0-2 or maybe 2-0-3. Like they have significant leads. And there was a really weird interaction, to be fair to Jizuke, where he used his Yone ulti and he got displaced by the Oriana ulti, and so it moved the Yone ulti. I don't know if I'm explaining that well enough, but it was a very weird interaction. To give him credit, like I don't think anyone knew how that interaction worked. So it was really weird. The point is, he ends up dying and giving over a 500 gold shutdown when he's very ahead in that game. Where, in my opinion, if he just waits for the Lilia sleep to go off, landing the Yone ulti is hella free. It's not like there was other things in that game that gave advantages back to TSM after EG was already way ahead. They just found ways to throw time and time again, and I think most people are going to remember the deathly throws because that was the ones that we saw latest in the series, right? It's what you saw last,
Yeah,
you know?
unfortunately, like it is just kind of the way it goes, especially in those like big climactic moments when somebody ints or somebody pops off. Those are the moments you remember as opposed to the rest of the series. And like you said, I think you could also like heavily fault Svenskeren in game one after he did get a really nice early game lead and got himself super ahead on the Lilia, and then had some just really terrible team play in the back half of that game. Um, but kind of, I don't know, just like talk about this series as a whole a little bit. I still think it was a very close series. Like 3-1, I don't think does it justice, and the ending doesn't really do justice to how close this series was. I think people were pretty on point in terms of like the relative level to these teams. And for me personally, like I kind of said at the start of this, it was more on EG losing it than TSM winning it, which is why I don't think my opinion of TSM has raised to the point where I think that they are better than Cloud9 or Team Liquid. I know
Mm-hmm.
last week you actually said that you thought that TSM was kind of equal to Cloud9 and Evil Geniuses in terms of their that week's performance. And while I think that is true, I think after this series, I definitely can say that I don't see TSM being able to take down Cloud9 or Team Liquid, regardless of wherever they meet.
I completely agree. I was more high on TSM last week than I was this week. I thought even though they lost to TL last week, I thought they looked better in the loss. I think they just went up against a much better team.
Mm.
I know a lot of people weren't happy with TSM's performance last week. I just think it's hard to be happy when you're playing what is, in my opinion, the best team in the league at the moment. Yeah, a little bit of foreshadowing to later predictions. But anyways, there was other things I wanted to talk about in this series because I didn't like specifically on the TSM side of things. I didn't think Hooney had that great of a series, honestly. I thought that coming into playoffs, we talked about how this is Hooney's chance to prove himself because he got to go up against TL, he got to go up against Alfari more specifically, and now he got to go up against Impact. And I thought he was outplayed by both of those junglers, to be quite honest.
Top
There was a
laners.
lot of times, pardon me?
You said junglers, top laners, you meant.
Oh, top laners. Yes, excuse me. There was a lot of times that, and you could blame Spica for this as well, but they were trying to force ganks in the top lane, and I got the feeling that it's Hooney calling for a gank and just forcing plays that just they had no business forcing. There was so much pressure that was absorbed by Impact in the top lane that it was like, wow, I can't believe how much attention Hooney is getting and how little they're getting done up there. And that was something that I was a little bit like, damn, like I really expected better things.
Yeah, I don't know. For me, I thought that's what was going to happen. Impact is basically just like a sponge, especially whenever Impact is going up against like good players or even like players who are perceived to be better than him. People always sort of doubt Impact, be like, oh, he's going to be able to hold his own. Like, oh, Hooney's been looking really good. Can Hooney sort of like, take down Impact or at least get the better of him in the lane? And I think what we just saw was classic old Impact just absorbing all the pressure in terms of ganks, playing out laning phases really, really well, and just doing as much as he can to shut down his opponent in lane. I think I was pretty surprised, honestly, in game four where Impact willingly picked the Aatrox into the Camille, which I thought was super, super interesting because Camille is kind of like a known Aatrox counter pick. But again, like Impact just completely shut him down from the get go. I think that was the game we were talking about you were talking about where he's calling for these early ganks that are where the TSM is reaching way too far and they're blowing Camille ult, Udyr flash, basically just for like 50% of Impact's HP. And
Yep.
Impact did play a really fantastic game four on the Aatrox. Again, a little blunder at the end with kind of baiting his team to go in with his flash there. But I think Impact had a really great series. definitely just showed that he still is, I think, the second best top laner in this league with no questions based on what happened against Huni. Um, but yeah, I wasn't necessarily super impressed with Huni. I think it'll be very interesting for whoever TSM plays in like the rest of the lower bracket when he goes up against Someday, because I think Someday looked much better than he has the entire season. We'll have to see how Fudge fares against Alfari, but Fudge had a really great series against Someday. Fudge is kind of on the rise, and Alfari is Alfari. So I think Huni will probably be pretty key for TSM through this whole lower bracket run.
Yeah, and I want to talk a little bit more about the Nocturne top because even though I don't think it was that great in lane, they had some pretty cool combos. One we've seen before with Nocturne Oriana, that's not all that new. But the Nocturne and the Rel combo was something that they got pretty good use out of. So that was something I was like, oh, okay, that's pretty cool. He ults in and then stuns with the Rel. So that was pretty cool, and I like that. The other thing that I think we need to talk about is PoE on Twisted Fate. I know you have some thoughts on this. I'll let you go, and I'm gonna slightly counter you, but go ahead because I know you have some thoughts on PoE and the Twisted Fate.
Yeah, I don't know. It's hard. When we were watching this game, we were also watching the Double If Meteos Sneaky Co stream, and they were kind of making a similar point. But it's basically just how Power of Evil looks super uncomfortable on anything that's not one of the main four control mages. The main four being Azir, Orianna, Syndra, Victor, and then you can kind of add like Seraphine in there as like a potential fifth, even though I wouldn't classify her as a control mage. But she kind of plays like a control mage in terms of your passive laning playstyle, and then you're just a team fighter. But
And your hella backline.
yeah, pretty much. But basically, I was kind of just making the point where it doesn't really make a lot of sense for TSM to be changing up their mid lane playstyle. We saw it in the Team Liquid series where he played a Lucian game, two Twisted Fate games, and a Lucian game, two Seraphine games, and another game on a champ who I don't remember. Even in this series where we saw Power Evil whip out the Twisted Fate again in game 2. To counter that, I think Jizuke had a really great Nico in that second game. His Everfrost, was really nice. He played the Nico super well. But basically, I just don't think Power of Evil looks comfortable on anything that's not control mages. And like I said, it's pretty weird that TSM is now in the playoffs sort of choosing to debut this style. And while I do think it's important to be able to play, your non-control mage champions and learn that, I think it's something that I would rather have seen TSM do in the regular season. I think it's completely fine to try out your new strategies and experiment a little bit in the regular season. We saw that with Cloud9 a little bit. We've seen that with a bunch of different teams in the past. Like one thing that TSM used to do all the time before was, they would say that, hey, they're trying out drafts. That was the whole like Bjergsen on Galio kind of meme that was going on a few seasons ago. And pretty much, I think, learning and debuting strats, there's a time and a place for that as the regular season. But when it comes to playoffs, you can't be doing those things. And I think we really saw in that TL series, Power of Evil he wasn't playing his style and didn't have the same effectiveness on the Seraphine or on the Twisted Fate. And in that game too, he was a huge liability in terms of, his just inability to lane with Twisted Fate, and then his lackluster ultimates where he ended up he was, behind on the play on Twisted Fate as opposed to being the one to make the play.
Yeah, so I actually agree with most of what you said. The reason why I said that I have a little bit of a counter is because I actually went and rewatched the game and I saw what happened and why he fell so far behind as the TF. So what happens is there's a gank mid, they get the kill on Jizuke, and him and Spica, PoE and Spica try to push the wave and they don't get it to fully crash. Now he was down one wave at that point, but then a minute or two goes by and he's all of a sudden down 3 waves because they didn't get it to crash and because the wave was frozen in a really bad spot from when they shoved it. So that's poor wave management on not just PoE but Spica also after the fact of a gank. They got a gank, they got a kill, and they got no advantage out of it because the lane was so shittered. And on the side of EG and Jizuke was able to punish really well with setting up the freeze in front. That's the only real counter I have there. But overall, I do agree that he looks a lot better on control mages, if I'm being quite honest.
Yeah, I would be very I think it's hard to say because against 100 Thieves, I think TSM could probably get away with it again, picking your non-control mage kind of champions because I think 100 Thieves is a much weaker team, even than Evil Geniuses, and even than your Cloud9s and your Team Liquids. Maybe they're they're not like a much weaker team than Evil Geniuses. Like 100 Thieves and EG are kind of comparable. But I think you could get away with this play style again. But I think in any rematch where you go up against Cloud9 or Team Liquid, I would be very surprised to see PoE on anything that's not the core 4 plus Seraphine.
Yeah, it is an interesting thought. But again, like you said, even though you wish you would have seen more in regular season, you do got to try different stuff at some point. I don't think, and we've talked about this before. TSM is not happy with winning North America. They want to have success at the international level, and I'm not convinced that you could do that playing 4 or 5 control mages only. I think you need to have more than one play style, and so we'll see if they're able to develop that over the rest of the year. Any other thoughts on this series before we move on to Dig 100?
Hashtag live evil.
Yeah, actually, one quick thought. I thought Ignar looked a little bit better, actually. That's one thing I forgot to mention. He had some nice rel engages. I still think we've seen him have more of an impact on the game in the past, but he still had a pretty good series. But anyways.
It was just weird because I don't think, like, other than Deathly, I don't think anybody on EG played particularly bad. I think everyone was playing pretty well for the most part. I just think that Sven Skaren had, he went from having a really great early game 1, to kind of inting it late game. In game 3, it was kind of like a bit just like poor team positioning from Evil Geniuses and decision making. And in game 4 was really just like definitely kind of inting the game. I really don't think that Evil Geniuses was like much worse than TSM. I think those teams really were pretty equal in skill level. And I kind of wish that we would actually get to see this series play out again, because I think it's probably about 50-50, or I would say like 55-49 in TSM favor, despite, the results.
Yeah, I definitely agree, and I just think that they're probably both better when 100 Thieves, who are still alive as well. But maybe not. I don't know. I guess that's not that obvious. I think that would be an interesting series as well. But let's go Dig 100. This series was a little bit lackluster. I would say it started off good, right? Game 1 was pretty good, wouldn't you
game
say?
1 was great.
Yeah, and then it got pretty bad by game 3. Game 3, I was just like, please end, man. This game sucks.
Yeah, pretty much. Game 3 just like went on for too long. It was just like watching it like a train wreck, basically. Like there's not it's not a whole way to describe it. Like I was watching the Double Lift Sneaky Media Code stream, and the game was basically over like 10 to 12 minutes into the game, and then we just saw like 20 minutes of just like absolute dog shit out of Dardoch.
Yeah, I think, look, there's been a lot of talk before about how Dardoch can tilt, but it looked like he was absolutely tilted. There was no doubt in this one that he was tilted, or at least I think there was no doubt. He was absolutely running it down, but he wasn't alone. They were all kind of running it down. And I will say that I do think 100 Thieves looked a little bit better than we saw them the past few weeks, honestly. Like, it was nice to see Closer kind of start to step up, and I thought he had a really good Hecarim game. He had a few Hecarim games, actually, I think. Specifically, one play really stood out to me where he ulted from max range and feared 3 people to save FBI, who was kind of caught out. It was a really, really nice ulti in the top lane. That's the kind of stuff that, like, you don't get to see all the time. And yeah, I don't know, like, for me, he's one of the players that needs to turn around his performance and go back to what he was doing last year or even earlier this year. If 100 Thieves is going to need, if they're going to turn it around, and I guess this is a start, right? Like, you need to 3-0 Dig if you want to prove that you're a top team, right?
For sure. The thing, I'm a bit hesitant though. While I think 100 Thieves, this is the best they've looked in basically about a month's time, I'm a bit hesitant to like think that this team could even like rival TSM, because I'm not going to spell my prediction. I don't think it's going to be a pretty series on the 100 Thieves side, mainly because I think their two biggest struggles in this like kind of slump that they've been on has been their solo laners. And I think if you look at this series, games 1, 2 specifically were really heavily on the Dignitas solo laners in terms of one picking very passive and non-winning matchups with the Ahri and the Gangplank both times. The game 1 was like pretty close, but it was kind of evident that your Gangplank and your Ahri weren't getting a whole lot done. They decided to kind of run it back in game 2, and we pretty much saw more of the same. It was just even like less competitive than game 1, because I think TSM, like we said earlier, 100 Thieves was doing a lot of great stuff in the early game, Closer specifically, like we just mentioned. And it was just like really, it's hard to kind of like judge their improvements, because I think their weaknesses, being the solo laners of Someday and Ryoma, well, more just in the mid lane, were kind of countered by the lackluster performances from Dignitas in Fake God and what's his face, Soligo.
Soligo. Yeah. So I do want to talk about the Ari, because you brought that up. Here's the thing. I actually don't think the champion is as bad as Medio, Sneaky, and Doublelift think. I just think it's a lot more situational, and I think in game one they did not do what you're supposed to do with Ari. They did not draft properly with it. So he was the only real AP threat they had that game, and so I think he went Leandries for that reason. I guess to have more damage or something. I don't know. But then he wasn't able to go Everfrost, and that's the Ari that I think is so good is Everfrost Ari. But that champion does not deal enough damage to be the only AP threat. And so I really think that they put themselves in this weird spot in game one draft by having him be the only AP threat. And I think that's one of the reasons why they lost that game. The Ari just couldn't do enough damage.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, if you look at even just like the drafts from when Jensen played the Ari against TSM and Soligo played the Ari against against 100 Thieves in game one specifically, one of the reasons why I thought the Ari pick against TSM last week was so good was because of how you can utilize Everfrost against basically quad melee team comp out of TSM. They had, if I remember correctly, TSM had Renekton top, Udyr jungle, Lucian mid, and it was some form of engaged support. But basically, 4 very short-ranged / melee champions, and I think in that sense, you can get a ton of value out of Ari with the mobility of your ult and your utilization of E and Everfrost. And then if you kind of look at this Dignitas draft, where they drafted Ari into Gnar, Hecarim, Orianna, Kai'Sa, Alistar, it's kind of champions that can kind of sit a little bit far back and have some really long-reaching engage tools. Alistar has like Flash, Headbutt, Pulverize. Orianna is just like a super rangy champion that can just play around her ball whenever. Hecarim, super long range with the fast move speed on E and the ult, which can cancel any, CC that you throw at him. Same with Gnar, who has just like insanely extra long engage with the mega transformation with the double jump and then the stride breaker and flash ult or whatever. I just think that like situationally, I think Ari can be a solid pick, but it does have to fit like specific draft conditions. And when you pick it as, like you just mentioned, your only AP threat, so you actually can't go the more utility route and you have to go a damage route. And then 2, when you can't really get a ton of utilization from the champ because the enemy team comp is somewhat rangy, it just looked and was really useless.
Rangy. I like the word rangy. But I get exactly what you're saying. I like one of the comments in the live chat that Jensen made Soligo think Ari is busted. That's kind of funny because Jensen absolutely did pop off on this thing. And like we mentioned, we both just mentioned that it's good to have multiple AP threats if you're going to run the Ari. The specific one that Team Liquid had it with was Nidalee, and I talked about that last week, how I think that's a really good CC chain, the Everfrost into the Charm to land a spear, and you get a whole bunch of damage out of that Nidalee. So that to me is like, yeah, that's what you want when you're drafting the Ari, and they didn't have that. So yeah, a little bit of a whoopsie there. Another thing that I have to talk about as far as draft is concerned is the GP into the Gnar. Now, I don't think that that's the worst thing ever, but we definitely saw that Fake God couldn't handle Someday in the side lanes, getting abused constantly in both games, I believe, actually.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So maybe you're thinking in game one, like, yeah, we can handle it, and then you realize, oh shit, we can't. But they didn't come to that realization of, oh shit, we can't. They ran it back again, and Someday just outplayed him. Definitely a top gap in this series. I think that was probably the biggest gap that we saw in the series, but had to be in the top lane, right?
Yeah, I didn't really have a huge issue with I don't know. It's hard to say because I don't think like Fake God got like gapped like fully. I think it was definitely like
I kind of do.
Well,
I think he did.
I think he did, but I wouldn't. I don't think I would. I don't like fault Fake God at all because, like I said, I really didn't like the way that Dignitas drafted with 2 sort of weak solo lanes and this early aggressive sort of ganking jungler. They had was it the Volibear in the first game or in the Udyr in the second game? Maybe it was the other way around. But basically, they have this early jungler who wants to be aggressive and wants to be making ganks and is just going for this like move speed build with CC. And you basically just have like 2 kind of useless solo laners for the first 15 minutes of the game. And that was what I think was like really was like the downfall of specifically top lane because Fake God is just naturally going to lose the lane because he's playing range versus melee top laners. And
I think. Sorry,
well,
sorry to interrupt.
I basically just think that you're naturally going to fall behind in that top lane matchup. And since Dardoch wasn't even able to get anything done in the early games, it kind of just made it like Fake God is basically useless the whole game. And I think Someday, in turn, did a great job of just like pushing like Fake God to like the brink of like, you can't do shit in this game.
So I think the GP was a little bit better in game one because I think they had the Volibear, but they also had the Callista Thresh. And I look at that and I'm like, oh my god, bot lane, you are getting dove. So like the GP ult is just something else that makes sure that that dive goes really smooth, right? If you're diving bot, you can turn off the tower, you can GP ulti, and you Callista ulti a Thresh in there. Like you are diving and it is so free. So it's like, okay, maybe that's why you draft with the GP. But then in game two, they didn't have that. That's when I think they had the Udyr. And
Yeah,
I know
yeah.
Callista was
I
banned as
just looked
well.
it up. It was Volibear game one, Udyr game two.
What did they have as AD? What was their bot lane
They had
in?
Zaya Thresh in game two.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Anyways, the game one comp is a lot better for diving bot lane, and I don't really think they were able to take advantage of that as much. Um, Another thing, we talk about this all the time, and it's usually in game one, right? Where you have your uh I don't want to say cheese pick because it's not always cheese, like where you have your pick that like teams aren't sure if they should ban it. And you gotta win those games because now you've shown your hand. To me, the Callista was that. Because we've seen Neo on Callista and we've seen him pop off with that champion. I even think that he still had a good game on it, but they lost that game and then they didn't get the Callista back the rest of the series. So that to me was that uh, we'll say cheese pick in quotation marks, even though it's not all that cheesy. Like people should know that there's a good chance Dig runs the Callista, but you could see that you weren't getting that back after game one. They realized, okay, yeah, we do actually need to ban this, and so you lost your chance to get a win with your power pick. I would
Dude,
say,
I think Neo was like he was like doing as much as he possibly could in that game one.
dude, when he was jumping over the wall,
His
come on,
Callista
man.
was crispy, dude. Like, yeah, he was like weaving like back and forth over the little like wall where like the blast cone is on red side. That was like disgusting. It was like
That got me out of my chair. I was like, oh my god, here it comes! Like this is it. But
yeah.
the TSM members were in that brush that spawns only on Ocean Map, and I think they had a pink in there. So when he jumped over the wall, he couldn't exactly go for them for the kills because he couldn't see them. Not to mention there's an Alistair sitting right there. The Alistair just would have comboed him and he would have died. My initial instinct was kill those fucking guys. But I watched it again and I was like, oh yeah, he probably shouldn't have gone for that. He would have just died and given it away another kill. So yeah, I don't know. He's so exciting to watch, man. I hope that we get to see more of this come summer because yeah, he's a fun player to watch, man, and he's so much better than I would have given him credit for at the start of the year.
For sure. I think Neo, didn't he's having a bit of a similar season, or had, I guess, because the season's over. But I think his season was pretty similar to Tactical's rookie season in summer 2020.
Oh yeah, not a bad comparison.
Obviously, he's not on like the same caliber of Team Liquid, but in terms of like his impact that he had on the team and like his just raw mechanics and like how like good he actually is on a few of these champions, specifically the Callista, because I think Tactical also had a really good Callista last year. It's really nice to see. I think we mentioned before, we're kind of seeing like Neo is the Johnson 2.0 potentially.
Yeah. I God, I have so much that I want to talk about with this series. Let's go with Ryoma. I want to talk a little bit about Ryoma. I think he got a lot of flame for his Orianna ultis. Some of them deserved, by the way. Some of them were a lot of misses. There was a sombrero play where he just ulted on top of his head. But I think he was using it a lot, and that's why I want to talk about it, is because he was using it a lot on moments that like I didn't mind him using it. Like he's clearly needs to base and like maybe he needs to ult just to see if they get the pick, and it's fine. I'm basing anyway, so I'm gonna go back get the mana for it, and the CD isn't that long. So I think that he was flamed a little bit too hard for some of his Orianna ultis. There are times that I think it's good to throw it out and see what you get. Because if there's no dragon up or there's no objective, you don't need that ultimate right away. There's a good chance that there might not be a team fight for a little while if the dragon isn't up. So there's some times that he was using it, and I was like, okay, that's fine. Even though I still don't think his Orianna was great, I just think that, yeah, sometimes you go for the pick and you miss. I will also say that even though I still don't, again, I don't think he had the best series. I did really like his Zoe though. I think he had a really, really good Zoe game. I think it was game 3 or was it game 2? Regardless of
Game
what it
3, he
was,
was playing Zoe.
he was landing every bubble, man. Every single one. Like, damn. It was really nice to see him have a pop off moment or game because I think he really, really needed it, right?
Um, the only other thing I really have to say about this was, or the series, I guess, is I found it a bit weird that they kind of took Aframu off playmakers in this series. He was kind of playing a bit of a playmaker in Game Three, but the way that Game Three kind of ended up, it was kind of clear that they were just a bit out of it mentally.
I mean, he was on Thresh a couple of games, wasn't he?
Yeah, but
Thresh is a playmaker.
it's definitely not your Rel or your Alistar, which is what
It's
Aframu
not.
has been
It's
doing
not your
all
hard
split,
engage. Yeah.
which was definitely weird to kind of see, and it kind of like harkens back to what I was literally saying before about how I really didn't like the double solo laners that Dignitas is picking with the Gangplank and the Ahri, because basically those are two champions that really don't have any playmaking at all. There, yes, Ahri has like the dash charm or the dash Everfrost. We didn't even have that in Game 1. In Game 2, we sort of had that, but basically it put all the playmaking on Dardoch's shoes in the early game, and when he wasn't able to get a lot done, there was just really no avenues for Dignitas to really succeed in the late game. They didn't have that just like engage button to go with, like with like an Alistar flash combo or a Rel flash W ult. And I was just looking back before I was gonna speak about this, look at the bans, and literally, both like engage supports were open the whole time. Like 100 Thieves, they had a Rel game, they had an Alistar game. The counterpart was open. They decided not to pick that op for the Thresh. And in the Game 3, we did see that Dignitas bot moved towards the Zyra Rakan. And, they played like the level 1, level 2 fight. They misplayed it. And you kind of see like from that point onwards, the game felt pretty over.
Yeah, so here's the thing. I wanted to see Aframu's Alistar as well because I think that is his best champion. He's a really good Alistar, but I actually think his Thresh is better than it was this series. I didn't
Oh,
think we
it,
saw
it definitely is.
his Thresh is normally pretty good. I don't think it was that great this series, but it's normally pretty good. The one thing that I was a little disappointed about, and they mentioned this on the co-stream, the Medios Doublift sneaky co-stream, was that he panicked to throw out his lantern. And this is something that we've seen so many Threshes do, but I think that's like, this shouldn't continue to happen. Sneaky made the really good point that you should ping where you're going to put the lantern so that the other team can't react right away. You know where to click right away, and then you can be clicking where the lantern's about to be before they can put down a pink ward. I thought that was a really good point that Sneaky made, and that's something I never thought of. But what I do think people should know by now is that you shouldn't just throw it on top of them when they're already in the middle of a huge melee. It's hard to click a bunch of stuff when there's champions and wards and the lantern to click. And that was a little mistake that Afro made, which I was like, normally Afromu, I don't think he would make that mistake on the Thresh. So that's a nitpicky thing, by the way. I understand that, but it's just I expect a little bit more out of Afromu's Thresh. That is.
Yeah, I wasn't necessarily like flaming the Thresh picking because I thought it was bad, because I definitely do agree. I think Aframu does have a good Thresh, but I just didn't like how they solely put the engage on Dardoch's back, and basically their team comp basically could only succeed should Dardoch have a strong early game, just due to the nature of their solo laners falling so far behind because their laning's not very strong. And when the enemy team is playing like these way more powerful early game junglers, Udyr game 1, Hecker in game 2, it's just really difficult for your solo laners to do a whole lot when you haven't had this lead, and your only playmaking is like a Volibear flash Q or an Udyr flash bear slap, and your follow-up is like a Thresh hook. And if you don't get it,
Yeah.
you basically have no way to like fight unless the enemy team is like misplaying giga hard.
Yeah, that's totally fair. And a couple things that I want to mention, but before we move on, just a couple of quick things. One, FBI actually popped off this series. The guy had 22 kills over the span of just 3 games. Yeah, I thought he actually looked really good, and you could tell he was ready to put his carry pants on. He had quite a few pop-off performances in this one, specifically game 1 and 2, I believe. And also, something that I learned in a Travis Gafford interview today with Papa Smithy, this was the first best of 5 they won with Papa there. I couldn't believe when he said that.
Well, he's only been there since season 10.
I mean, that's still though. I mean, they've made playoffs every time, haven't they? Or did they miss?
No, they didn't. Wasn't
Last year they were bad, but there was 8 teams that made playoffs, right?
No, but in season 10 spring, that was the whole actually
the Medios thing and the Cody son.
Yeah.
Okay.
Wasn't that like that was that part 2? And then
maybe I thought they were in the playoffs a lot more. Anyways, it still definitely surprised me. But yeah, maybe I'm giving them too much credit in the past. Maybe I thought they were better than they actually were.
Well, I mean, they're definitely. I wouldn't say 100 Thieves has like a winning culture, but they definitely, they I think are expected to be one of the better LCS teams. So it is a bit surprising to hear that that was their first
Yeah.
best of 5 series win in like a year and a half.
Yeah. They have a pretty big brand, I guess, right?
Yeah.
That's what you're really trying to say. Even if they don't win that often, they do have expectations from a respectable fan base. And
Hmm.
so yeah, for that to be the first BO5 win, it is quite surprising.
Yeah, I mean,
Um
especially with this roster, like imagine they go out and like they drop a fucking Dookie and they get 3-0'd and then holy
yeah.
moly.
Yeah, true. True. Instead they took the 3-0 for themselves. Um but with that, EG and Dig are both eliminated. Now, should we talk about? Should we go back to the was there spring of success? Should we get into that a little bit?
Yeah, I think it was 2 episodes ago now. We basically threw out the idea of if teams, the result of their split was going to be a success or not. I think let's start with Dignitas, just because we were just talking about them. It's hard to say this, but I would still say, regardless that they got shit stomped 3-0, I would still say that their split is a success because I
Agreed.
think this is a team that wasn't expected to make playoffs. They weren't expected to even like be like contending for like even potentially a playoff spot. People thought that this was going to be one of the worst teams in the league, along with Golden Guardians. And this is a team that they ended up making playoffs. They had a really respectable record going into the final week of LCS before they got like I think they went 0-3 in their last week, but they were 10-5 at one point. I think this roster has shown a lot of potential in terms of their ceiling and where they can be at. Because I think Fate God, he had a lot of great moments this season, and I think he does a really good job for that team and the role that he provides. Uh, Dardoch, unfortunately, he people are just gonna think about like this last game 3 about his season, but I think you look at Dardoch's season overall, he made 13 All Pro jungler. I think he did a really great job in the same terms of Fake Out, in terms of I said in terms of twice his role within the team, and everyone memed him for the whole A to Z jungle challenge thing at the start, but then ended up being like one of Dignitas's like best assets was Dardoch
They were
could play
winning
anything.
games.
Like he could play anything. Like they would whip it out and be like, okay, it's a new champ equals new win. So
Yeah, no, I completely agree. We said that too. We said no matter what they do in playoffs, it will still be a success. They definitely tested us on that theory, but it was a success nonetheless. There was a lot of interesting stories to follow with this team. There was the the full NA team, Dig NA toss, and there was also, like you said, the jungle picks. Every game he was picking a different jungle pick. So there was a lot of exciting stuff, and you come out 11-7 when no one expects you to win many games. Absolutely a success. I hope we see a little bit more of the early spring split Dignitas make a resurrection in summer. What about
mhm.
EG though?
EG, I would definitely say it's a bit of a failure, mainly because I think it was clear that this team had the potential to be like a top 4 team or even contend like against a team like Cloud9 or Team Liquid or TSM. But in the end, they faltered pretty hard. And again, people will remember the ending of that series with definitely kind of like ult flashing in to like trade his life 1-for-1 in that whole messy bot lane Alco fight. And it's hard to like look back on the season because it was clear that this team did have a lot of potential but was very inconsistent, and when the time came they kind of cracked under pressure.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. This to me is just not a success from EG, flat out. We mentioned last week how whoever lost between EG and TSM, it's going to be an unsuccessful spring because both of these teams should be wanting to represent North America at Worlds. Well, we know they both are, honestly. Peter Dunn came out in an interview and said it. We know TSM doesn't have really any interest in winning. I mean, of course, they have interest in winning locally, but it's been known for quite some time that they have more interest in winning on the global stage. And so, anyways, EG losing this series was definitely a big time yikers. Although,
Yeah,
man, they had great early games this past series, though. So it's not all doom and gloom. There is a light at the end of the tunnel. I believe in Peter Dunn. I think this team will get better. I don't know if I'm willing to say that they're going to rep us at Worlds, though. I don't know about that.
I think
Um,
they have the potential. I think it's just in terms of finding the consistency and like not inting.
Sorry, was just addressing something in live chat. Um, yeah, no, this team needs to be better, and I think they can be. Um, Okay, do you want to move to our weekly awards?
Yeah.
Po-
We got Popoff Beansoup. Who you had popping off?
I had Ryoma. There's a few people I could have given it to. I could have given it to Closer. I think he had a bounce back. Could have given it to Someday. Anyways, quite a few people, but I gave it to Ryoma because this guy has a lot of pressure on him right now. Everyone is always talking about how bad 100 Thieves has been in the mid lane, and I think that that's going to continue to happen. But he had a really good Zoe game. I know that's just one game, but I thought he was so good on it. And I mentioned earlier how he was hitting all of his bubbles. Ryoma popping off. Let's see some more of it.
I had Spica. I thought his early game was really just great throughout the entirety of this series. I, we did mention before how we thought that Spica could have more impact in the early game and kind of just seemed content with, the solo lane prowess of TSM, uh, getting them to the late game, where I think that is TSM's best strength right now is the late game in terms of objective control and team fighting. But I think Spiga did a really great job, and a lot of the games in the series against Evil Geniuses, he was the one getting first dragon, he was the one getting first Rift Herald. Sometimes the first two dragons, sometimes the first two Rift Heralds. I was just checking to see, but there was only in one game where two separate games where EG got uh, first Drake and first Herald, but pretty much Spica just had like the best objective control the entire time. He had a Baron steal, if I remember correctly. Uh,
And like we said, it's what we want to see out of Spica because it's not like TSM's late game has been bad. It's actually been quite good. I think it is their early game where they need to get things going, and Spica himself has admitted that that starts with him as the jungler. He controls a lot of the early game. So yeah, I think he's definitely deserving of the award.
Bean Soup. Who is Bean Soup?
I'm going with Deathly. Feels bad, man.
Man,
Dude,
give the
that
guy
was
a
some
break,
pretty.
huh?
I can't, man. I don't give anybody else a break. Well, maybe I do. I don't know. But anyways, I can't give him a break here. The team fighting was quite bad and very costly. And the thing is, I hope that he learned from this series. I hope that he goes in hungry or maybe even angry. That like, hey, look, I fucked up last time. I'm not letting that happen again. The next time he gets a playoff opportunity, if he does, right? I want him to be able to
Hangry, you could
capitalize.
say.
Sure. Yes. Yes. Let's say that. Hangry. I want him going in hangry, and I want him to be mad and not scared to make plays. I want him to be a beast.
Yeah, I had Dardoch just like tilting off the face of the earth in game three. What was so like terrible about that whole series was game one and game two was solo lane diff. And, I think Dardoch, he wasn't playing bad by any means. He just didn't have the most impactful early games, and their bot lane was trying their best to do what they could. And just the reverse kind of happened in game three, where I think the solo laners were actually playing pretty well. And, Dardoch and Neo and Aframu all kind of just like, the early game didn't go their way, and then you could literally see like Dardoch was visibly tilting in that game three, where
Oh God,
he
yeah.
was just like running into three people to get like a bear slap and peace out, either losing all of his HP or either dying. He was, I think, at one point into the game like 0-7-0. I think he picked up like one assist at the end of the game or something like that, or maybe it was two assists. But
Hooray.
he was like, if I'm playing League of Legends and like I'm clicking the report button and I'm clicking like negative attitude and griefing / giving up and intentional feeding on that one.
Whoa. Maybe. That's so funny. Okay, never mind. It's not the Bean Soup Award. It's the reported award.
Yeah, he's getting
Dardoch,
reported.
you've been reported, man. Times 9. Yeah. No, I got nothing to add on that. He looked bad. I want to see him look good again. That's all. Uh, let's get into the previews, right? Because we got some pretty good series coming up this weekend. Which one you want to start with?
Well, we'll go with the one on Saturday, which is C9 Liquid. Gonna be banger of a series,
Oh
no
God, yeah.
doubt.
Let's get her going. I am fired up for this series. Okay, where should we start? I want to start with the top lane. I usually like starting with the top lane, but this one is okay. Here's your tests, Fudge. Like, you better have studied, like you're going up against the best top laner. I mean, here's the thing, no one expects him to win, but you're going to have to hold your own if you want to win this series. So this is a really, really big test for Fudge. I don't know how to feel about whether he's going to pass, so to speak. Um, Afari's freaking good, man, and I still don't think that Fudge is there yet, where I can call him a top laner. that makes sense. I think he's getting there, but I don't think he's there yet. And so this is where I'm most worried for this matchup. I actually have TL coming out on this one. I have TL coming out 3-2 on top. Cloud9, I foreshadowed earlier that I think TL is the best team in the league right now. Naturally, I'm picking them. Where is your focus for this series? Anywhere different or same place?
Well, no, I think it's the same place. I think it is the top lane. But what I will say is I think that Cloud9 does have the majority of the advantages on the rest of the map. I think if you look at jungle, I'll take Blabber over Santorin. Look at mid lane, I would say mid lane is even. I would say a lot of mid lane is going to come down to probably who is better on the day. I think both of Jensen and Perks are two of the best 3 mid laners in the league. I think they both have a really wide champion pool, which should be really interesting to see. You know, we saw Jensen he kind of showed that champion pool a little bit in that series against TSM where he had the Ahri game, had the Sylas game. Perks has been kind of just playing a bunch of stuff in the mid lane. He's played, like, just off the top of my head, all the champs I can think of. He's played all the control mages. He's played Yone, Tristana, Lucian, Irelia, a bunch of shit, basically.
A lot.
Yeah, a bunch of shit. So I think mid lane will be super, super interesting just to see what they do from, like, a drafting standpoint, whether they just play control mage v control mage, or we'll see some, like, hype mid lane shit like Lucian versus Yone or something like that. That would be really cool. And bot lane, I think I just give the slight edge to Cloud9 because I think Core JJ and Vulcan have been somewhat equal. I think Core JJ has been slightly better, but I would definitely say that Sven has been much better than Tactical. So
is it because TL can't draft help me out here, Tristana?
I mean,
it's because they can't draft Tristana this
if
series.
If TL drafts Tristana, it's just free win. No, Tactical will run it down.
Oh my god, maybe I'm too stubborn, but I don't think there's no way he could do it again.
Yeah, exactly. I feel the same way. I don't think.
Can he Malphite ulti again?
I don't know. Jat's gonna, like, I don't know what Jat will do if he just starts doing that shit again. But basically, like you said, I think this series hinges on top lane. And what I don't want to see from Cloud9 is basically put Fudge on an island and say, hey, let's try to win the rest of the map because we know you're probably going to lose to Alfari. I don't want to see that. I think when Fudge looked his worst, it was when Cloud9 kind of put him on an island, gave him some sort of just weak side top lane, and he basically was, not having any impact in the game. This is like early on in the split where he would end up basically down 20 to 30 CS in almost every single laning phase, and then was just kind of along for the ride. And I think when Fudge has been looking at his best, kind of on this back half of the split and in their series against 100 Thieves, he was giving them counterpick. He was given early resources to be put in a position where, to succeed and where he's getting, a bit of a gold advantage. While I still think that Alfari is a much better player than Fudge, I think it would be a mistake for Cloud9 to just let topside be the weak side because Alfari will just naturally dominate him in the 1v1. So I would like to see Cloud9 play around Fudge, not necessarily like put him on a carry top laner and just like put all the eggs in his basket, but at least like give him a few so he doesn't starve up there. With that being said, I'm actually going to go C9 on this series because I think Cloud9's advantages on the rest of the map will outweigh, the deficiencies in the top lane if Cloud9 chooses to not just leave him on an island.
Okay, give me a number. What you got?
I don't know. I feel like
you don't know.
Well, no, I mean,
don't know?
I know. I'm gonna say 3-1, but like I kind of want. It's hard to say because like 3-1 Cloud9 sounds like I think Cloud9 is like the much better team. It's not. It's not really. I think this series is gonna be really, really equal. But I just feel like this series is not gonna go 5 games, so I'm gonna say 3-1.
He says, I don't know.
No, but I did know, but I didn't know what I was going to say after that.
Yeah, I'm just giving you a hard time.
I don't think this game is going 5 games.
I want to address what you were talking about in the top lane because I don't think, so I'm not saying that I think Cloud9 will or won't leave him on an island, Fudge being, like, that being Fudge. I think that they're just going to adapt in draft because I think that's very much how Cloud9 does it. I don't think they're going into the game saying we want him weak side or we want him strong side. I think they want jungle as strong side because they often play around jungle, and so they will draft in whichever way they think they can get advantages through the jungle. That's what I think they will do. If that means that he gets on weak side, then it's going to happen. That's what I think will happen anyways. Then, but I don't think that, I don't think they're going to go out of their way to put him strong or weak side altogether.
But I get, okay, just to sort of like talk about that, like in terms of getting Blabber like a strong jungle pick, I'm just going to pose a scenario. Like
Olaf. I mean, they want Olaf, but he won't get it. I don't think.
What I would like to see out of Cloud9 is like, let's say they're put in a situation where they're blue side and they have the choice between OP jungle pick and OP top lane pick, like let's say like Hecarim's open or
Uh-huh.
Renekton is open, I would hope that Cloud9 would choose to pick the Renekton first as opposed to picking the Hecarim and giving like an OP top pick over to Team Liquid for Cloud9 in response to pick like
Hmm.
your like Gnar into it or your Gangplank into it. Because I think if you take those just like laning phase, like basically like those lanes will be decided in like laning phase, and we've just seen that Alfari has like such a high proficiency in laning phase in terms of he'll win the lanes he's supposed to lose, and he'll dick the lanes he's supposed to just win.
So they might do that though. They might they might give the pick more to Fudge just because of the huge champion ocean that Blabber has. We've seen him get like 5 bans against him and still pop off on a jungle pick like Rek'Sai or something. So yeah, I could see that happening. It's not out of the realm of possibility. I want to talk a little bit more about the mid lane matchup because we got playoff perks, right? And that is a real thing, I think, anyways. That guy's pretty damn good when it comes to clutch moments. But I think Jensen has been the best player in playoffs so far. So I think this matchup is hella hype. But what I want to do is I want to make people recall what happened just a couple of months ago because I'm positive Perks has not forgotten this. Jensen said something along the lines, don't quote me here, but something along the lines
Oh
of,
yeah, I remember.
I haven't really learned much from Perks since he's come over here. Do you
Yeah,
remember what I'm talking about?
then I don't know if this is in the same interview, but I remember like a previous like one of the ones towards the start of the season where Jensen basically straight up said like I don't think that Cloud9 is going to be like that much better with perks because like Niski had his own unique playstyle and whatever. But I don't know if
Yes.
it was in that one or if it was like in a different one, but that's what I thought you were going to say. But you're basically
It may
just
have.
saying that perks is going to try to make him eat his words.
Well, honestly, kinda. Maybe. I think it's really interesting, though. I think if Perks smashes him, that's what people will point to. That's what I'm going to point to. If we see Perks smash Jensen next week, guess what I'm going to talk about? Be ready for it. It's going to be that. And I remember saying this on Hotline League, like, as much as I love Jensen creating like good and interesting trash talk to make the series interesting, uh that might come back to bite you in the ass. I always say you don't want to piss people off in this game, man. These are pros. They're very passionate about what they do. They don't like being embarrassed. And if you say I'm not worried about that guy's going to want to shit on you. And
Especially
I
when
think
that guy is perks.
that guy is Perks, man. So I think that is the most exciting part of this series is actually in the mid lane. Even though I'm more focused on the top lane because that's where I think the biggest disparity in skill would be. Yeah, I the mid lane's gonna be exciting, baby, and I
Mm.
want to see some fun picks. And I want to see, well, I think we'll get fun picks almost no matter what. Jensen played 4 different things 2 weeks ago, rather, and Perks has played. Well, it feels like Perks has played 4 different things per game, even though that's impossible.
Yeah.
Uh, but yeah, anyways, I'm excited for that.
Yeah. So just quick summary. I went 3-1. Blue Jays going, or sorry, I went 3-1 C9. Blue Jays going 3-2 TL. We got
Yes.
a lower bracket series now. TSM versus 100T. What do we think about that one?
I like TSM more,
I
even
like
though I
I
don't think
like
they looked.
TSM way more personally.
Yeah, yeah. Now, even though TSM, I don't think they looked that great this weekend. I think they've looked good overall throughout the summer split, and I can't look at oh they had one kind of rough weekend, and then be like, oh well they're shit now. Like I still thought that they looked pretty good against TL, like I mentioned earlier. Yes, they could have looked better, but I think they're definitely good enough to beat 100 Thieves, and I'm not. I'm pretty cold on 100 Thieves, as a lot of you know. Do you want to start off with a matchup? Is there any matchup specifically that you're looking at?
Well,
I know I
I
got one.
was I was mainly just going to talk about how like 100 Thieves, at least in their current form right now, like they don't have like that star player that EG kind of had with Impact and Jizuke, because those are two players in that series that can go out and win you the game, and I don't think 100 Thieves has that player that can go out and win you the series. The matchup I'll start with first is mid lane, because
Okay.
I think most likely we're going to be getting Control Mage versus Control Mage in this series, and I'm taking Power Revo all day if that's the case.
That is a pretty good point. Although I will say they started playing. Well, 100 Thieves started playing. I shouldn't say started, but they
One game,
played the TF this past weekend. So yeah,
played a
it's not
game.
like they're only relegated to control mages. But I do think you make a really good point. I think that that's what we've seen a lot of out of both of these teams. And yeah, I That's a very good point. I'm going PoE on that one all day long. That guy will out control mage probably everyone in the league, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe not Jensen or Perks, I don't know. But yeah, anyways, he's really, really good. And I think that there will be a disparity there in the mid lane. So that's quite a good point. I want to talk about top lane again, though. Surprise. This is an area where Huni, to me, has been so much better than Someday throughout the regular split, but I think we've seen that kind of shift the other way very recently. So that's why I'm really intrigued about the top lane. Again, I don't know. I guess I'm just always, intrigued by the top lane. But yeah, I want to see Huni look better, and I think we've started to see Someday look better. Mind you, it was against Fake God, who didn't look that great. But I think this is where you're going to see an interesting matchup in the top lane. I can't wait to see what the picks are, honestly.
Yeah, I agree. I was trying to remember when I was watching the 100 Thieves series, like when was the last time that Someday actually like shit on somebody? Because the last time I can remember was like game 4 versus like
You're talking
C9.
about before Dig, we're talking, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we just saw, okay,
Yeah, no, like basically apart from the series against Dignitas, the last time we saw Someday really like dominate somebody in a laning phase was like Fudge back in Lock-in, which at this point was like 2.5 months ago. And throughout the entirety of the spring split, we just saw a pretty lackluster Someday, and I think we saw a much improved Huni. And like you said, I think the tables have turned a little bit in terms of it becoming a little more even just off of the 2 series from TSM that we've seen and the 1 series from 100 Thieves that we've seen. But like you said yourself, it'll be pretty intriguing to see how the matchups go. I think Huni, he's shown proficiency on a lot of champions in top lane. He busted out the Nocturne against EG. TSM is one of the few teams, along with Cloud9, to run the Enchanter top lanes with a really a strong jungler pick like the Olaf or like the Udyr. He busted out the Lulu twice in the regular season. I think he played 1 Karma game as well. But I just think that Huni has a bigger champion pool than Someday right now, which I think gives TSM the slight advantage. But I think individually, if we see both players coming in on the same form like we have, I think it'll be very close.
Some funny comments in the live chat. Okay, so who are you giving the edge to in the top lane specifically?
I slightly to Huni because of the champion.
I think so
stuff.
too. Yeah, I think I'm giving it to Huni as well, but it's a lot more interesting than I thought it was going to be if you would have asked me a couple weeks ago. So that's really interesting. Going lane by lane, so obviously I think top lane I give the advantage there to Huni, to TSM, but then I give the advantage in the jungle. I give the advantage mid lane, obviously, like we said, and bot lane I actually go 100 Thieves still.
Yeah,
I think
I
FBI looked really good last week, and I think he's looked really good consistently throughout the year. I'm still a little bit more cold on Huhi than I was previously, but I still think he's good, and I still think that he can still bring a lot to a team, even though I think kind of the same thing with TSM's bot lane. I just think I slightly got to give the edge to 100 Thieves and the bot lane matchup.
Yeah, it's hard to say. And like I was mentioning before, for me, it's just a little bit hard to like take a lot away from that series against Dignitas because I think 100 Thieves' biggest weaknesses were kind of covered up by the performance of Dignitas in that series. So it's really hard for me to judge. If I have to give it a game score, I'm going to go 3-0 TSM.
Yeah, okay. I know what I was going to do before we started the podcast. I'll stick with. I'm going to go 3-1 TSM. It's pretty much the reason why you would expect. I think that there is potential that FBI can absolutely pop off. We've seen him do it quite often, even though his team has struggled. I want to see him do it at least once. 3-1 TSM. I still think they're the better team, so I'm going to give them the edge.
Just quickly, before we wrap up our prediction and everything like that, I have not pulled up the actual prediction scores in like 3 weeks now, but I can assure you these are the correct predictions. I made sure that they were correct. I'll pull them up now along with the playoff schedule because like we said, we have C9 Team Liquid on Saturday, TSM 100 Thieves on Sunday, and as you can see, I'm still up 1 on Blue Jay. We both have predicted the correct series throughout the entirety of this playoffs. And yeah, those are the records there.
Yeah, no, we both took Dig. We both took Dig.
You're right, we did.
Yeah.
So those are wrong. Naka went off for both. Okay, you're actually right. We did both take
That's kind of embarrassing too, because they got fucking smacked.
Dude, man, Dig was. Oh man,
I thought they would be
terrible,
better,
man.
Did you take them 3-2 or what did you? I took them 3-2. I thought
I
it would be
think
a
we
close
both said
series.
3-2. I don't know why I thought we got them all right. It just felt like that series. I'm just trying to wipe that series from my mind, honestly, because that was some terrible shit. Like, man, not gonna lie, I was like really excited for that series to happen on Sunday. I was like, oh shit, this is gonna be a good series, and then it was shit, and I was like so disappointed, especially just like how Game 3 just transpired.
I had such a long day yesterday and I had like a 2-hour drive home in like huge crazy ass winds. I was afraid I was going to be blown off the fucking road. And so I was like, "Oh, I finally made it home. I get to watch this series." And that's what I was left with was a stupid awful 3-0. But anyways, and let's not hang on that all day. Anyways, props to JNT. He's taking the lead for now. Maybe the TL one will get me back
Maybe,
into things.
yeah,
Maybe I'll have to not take CLG as much in summer. Um, Although I'll probably take CLG a bunch in summer. We'll have to wait and see. But yeah, props to JNT for taking the lead for now. For now. Let's get into some speed run quick news. Huh?
yeah. First up, CLG released Wiggly, Griffin. I wrote it down as Griffin / Wiggly, but his name is Griffin now. And then also a little quick follow up to that. Like a few hours later, after that happened on Twitter, a former CLG coach, ex Sojin, who is like their former academy coach, spent some time on the main coaching staff. Basically, was just shit talking CLG on Twitter, saying that org is a curse, and he's glad that Griffin is no longer there. So I thought that was a bit funny.
Like, okay, CLG's been a punching bag from the community for a while now. I didn't know they were a punching bag from their own people. like, like I guess he's not with them anymore. But damn, that feels bad. Also, I got to give an extra bean soup out to whoever made the announcement because they were like, "Thank you, Wiggly. You had that MVP season or something like that." And I think a lot of people looked at that and went, "MVP season?"
Well,
Question mark? Question mark? Question mark?
dude,
What
I
MVP
think it
season?
was because
What are
um
you talking
well,
about?
it was that split where CLG was actually like not terrible and they finished like fourth place or whatever. It
Let me
was
tell you, man, it was not a MVP season.
well, but the reason why I think they say that was because if I remember correctly, when like the LCS comes out and say like, "Oh, these are all the people who are in the race for MVP," he probably
Mhm.
got like one vote, so his face showed up on the graphic or something like that. And so like if he's technically in the race for MVP, they basically just pulled it like they pulled the fast one on us. But I
So,
think technically they weren't wrong, but he was never going to win MVP, so
I
come on.
do because I have stuck up for him before in saying this, and I do see in the live chat there's something that I actually want to address because someone says CLG hasn't been good since like 2015. In general, yes, but there was the one. I don't know if it was the full year, if it was just the one split, but they finished third or fourth in the regular season. I think they finished third in Detroit. They were there for the third fourth match in Detroit. Did they win that?
Yeah,
But then they
they
lost
they, they
in
beat they beat Clutch, but then they lost the rematch or whatever, and then
right, right. So they weren't always bad. It does definitely feel that way though.
they've
It
always
def-
they got dude one split doesn't count.
yeah. Um oh yeah, true. You were there in the live chat, poggers. But yeah, no, I mean you can't really celebrate being third or fourth place in the LCS. Like that's something people are not going to remember clearly. So yeah. Anyways, kind of yikes, but also probably a good thing because I don't think Wiggly's CLG chapter was a great one. I don't
Yeah.
know if that means the end of his career because it might. I don't know how many teams would want to pick him up at this point, sadly, but definitely one that I'm sure he's not too fired up about anyways. So maybe it's for the best, you know?
Yeah. Next up, Nemesis was basically talking about on his stream how the whole vibe during Fnatic's Worlds 2020 bootcamp wasn't so great, and he kind of figured out that he was going to get replaced before Worlds had really even started. Kind of shitty to hear about. Doesn't really give you a lot of confidence, especially like when you're about to start your Worlds run. Kind of sucked because I think Fnatic had a pretty good Worlds run for the most part in 2020. I think they had that really close quarterfinal series against Top Esports, which I predicted correctly, by the way. I just want to throw that in there. Um, yeah, it just kind of sucks to hear that like basically he was like going into Worlds with the mentality that he was kind of off the team anyway.
Man, this actually like it made me upset. Like this was a real feels bad if you know that your team wants to replace you as you're supposed to sit there and grind for worlds, and as everyone's already flaming you all together, like, dude, that sucks, man. That really sucks. I really feel bad for him. I can't wait for him to get back on a team. We know he's good enough to be in the LCS or the LEC. He's probably going to go to the LEC if you ask me. But I can't wait for him to get a redemption opportunity, let's say.
Mm-hmm.
Because, yeah, I feel like that's just doing him dirty. Mind you, I don't think they leaked it on purpose, but they leaked it nonetheless. And that just feels bad, especially when you're on a team and you know they don't want you. Yikes.
Yeah, it's man, it just kind of sucks. Like I remember when it first came out that like he didn't really get a starting spot on a team. It was a bit confusing because he was arguably like a top 3, top 4 mid laner in the LEC, and if you ask me, like being a top 3, 4 mid laner in the LEC is pretty respectable considering the level of competition there.
There's definitely LCS teams that need him if they had import slots and cash, but well, we know the story there, so yikes.
Next up, FlyQuest. They have their next initiative, or like a side initiative or whatever. It's called
Is
Me
it Me
Quest.
Me Quest?
Jamie,
So
tell us about it. You watched the video.
people are wondering why I'm laughing, it's because JNT thought it was Meme Quest.
Yeah.
But like, I won't be surprised if that's what it ends up getting called, just because people love to meme about anything and everything. It's kind of cool. It's not for me. It always feels like FlyQuest does these things that are like kind of cool, but they're just not for me. Like, don't get me wrong, I think Saving the Bees is great. I'm just not all that excited about Saving the Bees personally, but I'm glad they do good things. This is another one. It's kind of like basically they want to help people set goals and achieve their goals together. And so they're trying to create an environment where people can share what they're trying to do and have a way to hold themselves accountable. So whether that's like go for a walk one day or get X games of solo queue in or something like that, their players are going to set their own goals and they want their fans to set goals with them. And then they try to, I don't know, I guess motivate each other to help them knock it off their not bucket list, but you know what I'm trying to say, off their list of to do stuff. I think it's kind of cool. And like people are saying, Juru in the live chat saying like FlyQuest is really good at community building. I could not agree more. They are one of the best teams, if not the best team in the LCS at doing that, especially considering how like small of an org they are in comparison to the big boys. They have a really large impact on the community, and I love them for it. So let's go FlyQuest.
I remember a few weeks ago we shouted out their CEO. I think her name is Trisha again.
Trisha. Yep. Again,
I can't remember her like tag or whatever. It's something like X something in the middle, Bears, whatever. But she's really great. Like you just said, like FlyQuest has done a really great job in terms of building a community without like having a foundation of being one of those old guard LCS teams who's won a bunch.
They're so unique, man. Like I just love them for that. I love how
but you don't like
unique
their
they are.
jerseys. Not their
No, their jerseys are kind of caca. I'm not gonna lie. I don't like their jerseys. They look like a t-shirt. I'm sorry. It's just like I could just get a regular white t-shirt at the store. I want a jersey, you know? But anyways, I've gone on enough.
Next up, Riot teased the new champion, Gwen. She's got scissors.
The scissors look cool, right?
They did. I thought the champ looked pretty cool, minus her like one ability where she like does that wide snip. The champion looked cool. I don't know. What I will say though is if thematically this champion is not countered by Malphite, something has just gone wrong in the world, because like surely Malphite just has to counter that champion because Rock beats Scissors. You know what I'm saying?
Ah, nice. That's good. Did you come up with that on your own, or did you find that on Reddit?
Well, I saw there was funny stuff on Twitter being like Malphite better counter Gwen, or it's like, or the other one was like if you're ever playing like Papercraft Anivia or Papercraft Nunu or all those other ones, like it's just GG. But seriously though, if Malphite does not naturally counter Gwen, they've fucked up thematically with the champion already for me, and I don't like it.
True. I'm happy that the champion looks cool. Like I said, I think the scissors look hella cool, but I've said this before. I'm done with new champions, man. There's too many in the game.
It's going to be cancer. It's going to be cancer. I've just accepted it.
That's the other thing, too. They said that we don't want to release champions that are just OP all the time now. And then, like, the champions always come out and they're OP all the time.
They said that before, like, they released Samira or something like that. Or it was in that, like, time frame.
Riot, stop it.
Yoy.
Yeah.
Yeah,
The champion looks cool,
it
and I
looks
think they.
cool.
That's one thing I will say. They do a great job of making all the champions look hella cool, and the lore is always sweet. So it's like there's some good and bad.
Mhm.
Yeah, Juru in the live chat. Some champs need to be relegated. Let's get rid of some of these guys. I've been really vocal about how much I hate Tom Kench. I think people would be really pissed if they took out Tom Kench. I would not be one of those people.
Wait, I don't think
See ya.
anybody would be pissed if they removed Tom Kench.
There are a lot of people that like to unclog the frog, and what else do they spam?
Unbench the
Unbench
Kench.
the Kench.
I think
Yeah,
that's
like
the one that comes to people's mind before the other one that you just said.
yeah, true. But there are people that like Tom Kench for sure, man. I am just not one of them.
All right,
Uh,
next up, Wild Rift, the League
yes.
mobile game's out now.
So that's one thing
Cool.
where like, let's go, right? Because I haven't played it obviously, but I've heard really good things and nothing but good things. So that's kind of cool.
Yeah, I'm seeing like they must be paying a fuck ton in advertising because it feels like
Oh.
whenever I'm getting ads on my phone when I'm watching YouTube, it's only Wild Rift. And yeah,
Mm.
I'll probably end up giving the game a try, probably at some point when I get too tilted about playing League, which happened today. So I don't know, maybe that'll be something
So
I do
you're gonna be
tomorrow.
so you're gonna be spamming Wild Rift then because
Maybe
you're gonna
maybe
be
I'm going
tilted
for
every.
like rank 1 Wild Rift because League of Legends is like, oh god.
How do you think it'll do as an esport?
Oh god, esports, mobile games, esports. Shout out Matt Hutchinson. Fucking Christ.
Oh man, I don't know what to think. Like I like maybe there's a good chance. Like well, there is a good chance that it pops off as an
It,
esport, but
it'll probably
there's the
be
argument
like
that's like
a East only kind of thing, I would assume.
maybe my thoughts are like would I really want to watch that if the actual version is better than that? And I think so many other people do as well. Like I think most people would just rather invest their time in actual League of Legends than Wild Rift. I could be wrong. I might be wrong, but we'll have to wait and see.
Alrighty. Last up, some non League of Legends related stuff, but still kind of pertains to one of the orcs.
Mhm.
Cloud9 is shutting down their CSGO project for now, they said.
This is interesting for a few things. I want to remind people that when 100 Thieves announced that they were dropping their CS:GO team, that we hypothesized, well, maybe that frees up some spending for their LCS roster, and then 100 Thieves went out and bought all the players from Golden Guardians. The only thing is that it just doesn't apply here because C9 spends anyways, and they're never going to have issues with spending on their League of Legends team. But I do still think it's really interesting that like they've been in CS for such a long time, and it's kind of sad to see it die. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah, they said for now, so it kind of feels like they're gonna go through like another reboot. Because not gonna lie, like I haven't been following a lot of CS:GO recently, but I followed a ton of CS:GO from like 2015 to the kind of the end of 2018, and that was like the true peak of Cloud9. Like I remember their OG like 5-man roster with Nothing, Shroud, Skadoodle, like Freakazoid and Sean Garris, like way back at like IEM Katowice 2013 or whatever. Like I never watched those games live, but like that roster was like really epic. And then you had the whole like phase with the Stewie 2K roster, and then they drop Nothing in Shroud for Tarek and Rush, and they win the major in 2018 in Boston. I still can like vividly remember like when I got off work and I went to go like watch that like finals for the E League major in like a Starbucks because I'd literally just gotten off of work and I didn't want to like I had to take the subway home and I didn't want to like miss watching the series at all. So I sat in a Starbucks for like literally like 3.5 hours to watch the whole series. And they fucking won the major and it was so sick. They beat Face Clan in like that triple OT match. Fuck, that shit was epic, man. It sucks to see Cloud9 kind of moving out of CS:GO for now, but like they said, um, they've had some difficulties running sort of like a North American based CS:GO organization abroad, and it just kind of they basically just said it didn't really work. So I assume that this will be something that Cloud9 probably picks back up again when COVID stuff sort of gets figured out. But we'll have to see. Yeah, Blue Jays just informed me that he's kind of lagging out, which he was. I wasn't going to say a lot because it is the end of the episode. Appreciate everybody that was in a live stream. We had a really active chat today. We weren't exactly sure kind of how the viewership was going to be going to this later schedule, but it's good to see that at least 20 people for the most part were hanging out, talking in the live chat. Really appreciate any of you guys that come to the live stream, watch the YouTube video. Our YouTube video got a ton of views. We were really surprised to see a huge uptick in views. So if you're watching on YouTube right now, really appreciate you guys. We basically almost got 500 views, which is pretty crazy for the most part, because a lot of our earlier on episodes were in like the 20 to 30 view range, and we've really been getting a lot of consistent support from everybody. So we appreciate that so much. Yeah, obviously Jamie Blue Jay's got nothing to say. So this has been episode 35 of the Clown Fiesta podcast.